skeptical theist. Oh, recording in progress. I am a skeptical theist on a good day, an agnostic on all the days, and a lover of praying, especially when I'm mad at a God I may or may not believe in. And as some of you may already know, probably not, I don't know that I've met any of you, but some of you may already know, I came out of a fire and brimstone Pentecostal tradition that taught me a whole heap of things that I do not believe about what the day of Pentecost meant and what really might have happened there in that story that I briefly talked about with the kids a few minutes ago. So it is not Pentecost Sunday. However, since we're Unitarian Universalists and we do not really go by the Christian liturgical calendar, some of you may not have known that it's not Pentecost Sunday had I not mentioned it. So since I wrote this for Pentecost Sunday, happy Pentecost Sunday, everybody. I am fully aware that I am preaching to a beloved body of believers in all kinds of different things, because that's an easy assumption to make in Unitarian Universalism. I believe that it is no accident nor incidental detail of my particular calling that I am a former United Pentecostal. It is no small thing and no lightly made choice that Unitarian Universalism is unabashedly the beloved faith of my grown-up soul. Both truths are exactly what make me a skeptical theist on a good day, an agnostic on all the days, and a lover of praying, especially when I'm mad at a God I may or may not believe in. We are told in Christian scripture that the day of Pentecost is when God's Spirit descended upon God's people in a little room in Jerusalem like a rushing mighty wind that shook the house. We are told that actual fire lit upon their heads without doing any harm. We are told that they spoke in other tongues to signify the infilling of that Spirit, that people who had gathered from all over the world for the Jewish Holy Feast, which is what Pentecost was before Christianity co-opted it, like most of our best holidays that we know and love. These people were from all over the place, all over the world. Speakers of many languages were present. And the story goes that these local dudes were suddenly, out of nowhere, after the big dust up of wind, speaking the good news of universal inclusion in languages that all of the gathered could understand. And that's it. That's the Christianized message of Pentecost as it is commonly taught. Boom, there it is. The Spirit-filled people, they spoke in other languages so that others could understand the good news in their own tongues. Now, I know that is too much suspension of disbelief for most of us, including and especially me. I also know that we know that no sacred text was ever written with the intention of being taken literally, not all the way. I know that there are possibly many other deep metaphorical meanings that have been completely lost on us through the translations and cultural shifts over the millennia since that story was first written. But I also know that for me, there is no other religion-based story that is more Unitarian Universalist than this one. And I'll tell you exactly why. Here is what being a Unitarian Universalist raised in Pentecostalism means to me. It means that I get to have, in my cultural canon of sacred stories, a tale of the most diverse group of people imaginable, assembled for a celebration, a group of which had gathered specifically to listen for ways in which they could do the greatest amount of good for the most people in a time of major leadership transition, when Spirit unexpectedly, unceremoniously showed up and showed out and showed them that they could celebrate common ground through diversity, not in spite of it. Whoa, they'd never tried that before. No hierarchy? Everybody with equal access to all that is good and holy? spirit, source, God, evolution, natural progression didn't suddenly give everyone a common language or perspective, and has not done so anywhere that I know of yet. But this story tells us that on that day, Spirit spoke through people in the ways that all the other people could understand. People who never expected to be fully included in the celebration because they were too different. Now, that revelation required a recalibrating and a screwing up of all of the religious dogma that I was taught about what made that story significant and worth sharing through the generations. Y'all don't tell my mama that I said this, okay? But it was never about the woo-woo of speaking in tongues. It never was. That is something that a particular sect of a particular faith believes, which I respect, but which sometimes makes them feel special and set apart. And that is exactly the opposite of the whole dang point. It was and is about speaking clearly and deliberately in ways that draw people in and include us all. Beloved Unitarian Universalist siblings in faith, we often speak about the spirit of life or the spirit of love, which we use as a sort of placeholder for the source that each of us would define very, very differently. There are as many opinions about that spirit as there are people hearing this message, and probably more, because I know I have several working definitions depending on my mood. But if the infilling of the Spirit is anything real at all, it must be about nothing less than radical inclusion and saying the things that we believe matter in ways that people can understand. And so this, I believe, is the true call of the story of Pentecost. We, believers in covenant, not creed, atheists, theists, and everyone who rightly makes up their own definition of the holy, if we are to believe that full inclusion of all who want to know what we have to offer is a worthwhile goal, inherent to our values and principles and covenants that define who we are together, then I submit to us that we are speaking in the Spirit when we speak in the languages of the hearers. In real Unitarian Universalist congregational life, that might look something like having hearing augmentation devices ready for all who need them, printing the sermon for non-hearing folks to read. We don't always do that. I'd like to get back to doing that. Always using the microphone when possible, whether you think you need it or not. Including a relevant and thoughtful message for the children. Creating worship that honors the needs of people with neurodiversity and cognitive differences. Setting up our spaces to welcome people with all abilities. Radically welcoming unconventional families, whatever that may mean to us. Finding practical ways to navigate literal spoken language barriers. Calling people of all genders and identities by their true names and pronouns. Assuring that our seating options accommodate all body sizes. Lifting especially the wisdom of the oppressed and the marginalized. Making it a priority to share multicultural music. Preaching from all of our Unitarian Universalist sources and then some. The words of our modern day world changers, the wisdom from the world's myriad religions, the wisdom of science and nature and technology and ongoing discovery we cannot yet even imagine. We are speaking in the Spirit when we say loud and clear that Black Lives Matter. We are speaking in the Spirit when we proclaim that Arab hate and genocide is unacceptable. We are speaking in the Spirit when we insist on non-binary language about gender and non-ableist language about ways of being in the songs we sing and in the words that we share. We are speaking in the Spirit when we say nothing at all, because it's time for someone who has been too long marginalized to speak and have our full attention. That, my friends, is how we go about the business of speaking in the Spirit. Tongues of fire, indeed. That metaphor of fiery communication is significant to me, partly because of what fire can do. Out of control tongues of fire kill and destroy. But deliberate, tended tongues of fire can burn away all of the dross and leave behind only the strong and precious things of value. Tongues of fire light the chalices that really are just a metaphor for our own bodies, after all. We are the tended, welcoming fire. We are the radical welcome and hospitality, and our words do have the power to strengthen or to destroy. I see my version of Unitarian Universalism and Universalist community in a reading called Gate 9A by poet Naomi Shihab, in which the author has encountered and has begun trying to assist a terrified Palestinian woman by speaking to her in her language. The elderly woman was trying to understand that her flight had been delayed and was understandably scared in a strange place surrounded by loud announcements in a language she did not understand. Shiabnai writes, the minute she heard any words she knew, however poorly used, she stopped crying. We called her son, and I spoke to him in English. I told him I would stay with his mother. She talked to him. Then we called her other sons just for fun. Then we called my dad, and he spoke to her for a while in Arabic and found out that, of course, they had 10 shared friends. Then I thought, just for the heck of it, why not call some Palestinian poets I know and let them chat with her? She was laughing a lot by then, telling about her life, patting my knee, answering questions. She had pulled out a sack of homemade cookies out of her bag and was offering them to all the women at the gate. To my amazement, not a single woman declined one. It was like a sacrament. The traveler from Argentina, the mom from California, the lovely woman from Laredo, we were all covered with the same powdered sugar and smiling. And then the airline broke out the free beverages from huge coolers, and 2 little girls from our flight ran around serving us all apple juice, and they were covered with the powdered sugar too. And I looked around that gate of late and weary ones, and I thought, this is the world that I want to live in. The shared world. Not a single person at this gate, once the crying and confusion had stopped, seemed apprehensive about any other person. This can still happen anywhere. Not everything is lost. Isn't that a beautiful vision of beloved community? I just love that. Beloveds, may we strive to be fluent, or at least conversational, in the languages that allow other people to cease their fearful weeping and break out the cookies and juice on high anxiety days when there's uncertainty in the air and no one's sure we're going to get where we intend to go. May we strive to be fluent, or at least conversational, in the languages of naturalism, Judaism, atheism, Christianity, humanism, Islam, paganism, and all the other faith languages that are always at some point right here among us as perfectly valid and wonderful ways of being Unitarian Universalists together. May we strive to remember the lessons I learned from that fiery story from my childhood faith, when Spirit unexpectedly and unceremoniously showed up and showed out and showed people that they could celebrate common ground through diversity, not in spite of it. May we strive to be ever mindful that tongues of fire have the power to strengthen or to destroy, and it is our responsibility to never leave the flame unattended. And may all the good that we hope for ourselves and for each other be stoked and fueled today as we speak together in ways that strive to make it true that all people can hear our message of saving love in their languages. May it be so. May we be the ones who make it so.